Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you are listening to the show as a podcast or right now in real time. This is Meanwhile Here on Earth, and I am your host, Peter Robbins. A quick word about an event that happened last weekend. Exeter, New Hampshire is a beautiful town, archetypically New England. Main Street looks a bit like a Currier and Ives print come to life, mid-19th century. And in 1965, there was a very well-documented UFO incident in the town involving a large red craft observed by a number of individuals, including local police. It was documented ultimately by a journalist who needs no introduction to folks who are interested in the subject of UFOs. John G. Fuller was an investigative writer who gave us the book Incident at Exeter. And being that happened in 1965, this past weekend, a week ago, we marked the 60th anniversary with our annual UFO festival and conference. I got involved in this conference 8 or 9 years ago because it had a unique angle I really liked. Every year, Labor Day weekend, they have a combination festival and conference, a lot on the model of McMinnville or Roswell or Pine Bush or Edinburgh or any of the other towns that have, and cities in America that have similar events. And my co-producer, Mike Stevens, a great ufologist and a good friend, partner up with the local chapter of the Exeter Kiwanis International. And I'm particularly proud of the event because it's the only UFO or paranormal event I'm aware of in the world, really, where every cent of the profit above and beyond our operating expenses goes for children's services in the greater Exeter area, almost all of it in the form of scholarships. Last year, we raised over $60,000 that goes to young people. This year was probably our best year yet. I don't have the figure, but I think we broke that amount. It takes place in the historic town hall, built in 1853 and in 1860, where an up-and-coming politician named Abraham Lincoln spoke 4 times, then went on to New York and the presidency. It's the only time, and I ask that you, when we get that K-run off, well, you can see there's one car sitting in front of Exeter Town Hall there. For 3 days a year, I have a reserved spot in front of Exeter, New Hampshire Town Hall. Talk about bragging rights. The festival and the conference this year pulled in more than 2,000 people to join in the fun events for kids. A wonderful jazz concert by one of the speakers, who's also a brilliant jazz pianist, Eric Mintel, and the conference itself. And you can see very traditional Main Street there. Things getting started. Larger crowd. Very typical window of the merchants who make the most of this event. two of our speakers, the great Charlie Fultz of the Allagash incident, one of the most remarkable abduction events of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And Steve Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group was one of our speakers as well. And here we have a few other speakers, which includes myself, Jimmy Penterino, Mike Stevens, and Charlie Fultz. I think everybody had a good time, but more to the point, everybody knew what this festival was about, and the feeling of camaraderie was outstanding. Also, this beautiful town hall that we've been using for 13 years, we may be at the point where we have to move on to a less romantic location, possibly the junior high school in Exeter, which has a wonderful auditorium, but may that be our biggest problem. Anyway, it was a wonderful event. It'll happen again next year. I will let you know about it, and with any luck, perhaps we will see you there next year. Okay, now I managed to just close the file that I was looking at. And so you're going to give me a moment here while I go back and find that file. See, this is live radio. When things screw up, they happen in real life. And here we go. Today's guest. In 2013, Eric Mitchell went from being your average American single working dad to the main character in a series of events that have captured the attention of professionals in multiple fields of study and endeavor. Prior to 2013, Eric had no real interest in extraterrestrial phenomena or any other high strangeness areas for that matter. But his experiences, witnessed in some cases by other people, led him on a path ultimately to help others living with the experiencer's experience. Eric has spoken with and assisted at this point more than 3,000 experiencers worldwide, as he brings to light the physical changes that have and can happen to people that are in this category. Mitchell actively works with scientists and researchers to make data available, data that is the beginning of the answers to some of the complex questions surrounding the experiences that he and so many other people live with throughout their lives. Currently, Eric is also preparing his first documentary film release to be called Experiencer. Experiencer is a snapshot of Eric's story, along with other real accounts not in the spotlight of experiencers, most of whom have never told their stories on camera. And it is a pleasure to welcome you to the show, Eric Mitchell.
Thank you so much, Pete. I am thrilled to be on here with you. You know, it was 13 years ago. I didn't believe in the subject at all. Just like an average person, your parents don't believe, your friends don't believe. You begin to think maybe those people are just, wackadoodle. But I certainly got my turnaround. I had no idea what these objects were. They were coming down into my yard almost nightly. My neighbors were scared. Somebody from the Pentagon was sent down to kind of spy on my family, but it's such a small town. One of the porters actually caught him with pictures and all kinds of evidence that he was stalking myself and the children. There was so much going on, and I had to reach out. What do you do? The government? Is there? I had no clue about MUFON. I didn't know about any of this stuff. So
Yeah.
I actually tried to reach out to some ufologists, and I've met a few of them, and you were the first person that actually had time to sit down and had a conversation. And I could literally hear you typing in the background, and I must have sounded much like a stressed out lunatic.
No, just stressed out.
Good. Good. I've been tested for the other stuff. I'm good there. Although I wanted the free check and medication, that would have been great compensation for my trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is a heartfelt meeting with you today because 13 years ago, um, Peter, I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have survived. You were there with the convoys and reassured me everything was going to be okay. And eventually I found Barry Gaunt. He was the state director of Kentucky. And he had 50 plus years under his belt. So I was in good hands. I think MUFON got a 30-day sighting report because once Bear, we call him Bear, he's big, big guy with a big heart, and so MUFON got just a sighting report, and we took this one off the books because there was just way too much going on. A lot of other investigators wanted to get involved, but he wanted to keep the case very clean, so sure you're aware of how mucky the waters can get when it comes to stuff like that. There were people that were trying to debunk the case because they weren't allowed in, not that they were in the know about anything. But that didn't work out too well for them. Data collection, the whole team was great. We had Angelia Shear, state director of
She was great.
Oh, you met her? She was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time together. She is, or just boots on the ground. That little girl will outdo most men in the field. And so she saw things that, and picked up on things that a lot of people didn't notice. And she gave a lot of notoriety to what was going on. But
Eric, let me ask. My mic turns itself off. I don't take it personally, but I do wonder sometimes. Let's go back earlier to your childhood. Where were you born, Eric?
East Providence, Rhode Island.
And can you tell us a little about your folks and your early family life?
The first 5 years, I don't remember much of it. This does get a little off the books, but basically my mother, when I was 5 years old, met this military man and fell in love with him accidentally. So it caused a divorce between my parents. And at 5, we flew out to Arkansas. This man fought in the Vietnam War, Green Beret. Didn't know much about him. I was just a kid. But it turns out he was involved in an operation where they were stuffing coffins full of guns, shipping them over to Vietnam, and the coffins would come back with pure cane heroin. And he was instructed to do this, by his unit. So
wow.
He got in trouble. They gave him a plea deal if he would talk about the operations. So he got the plea deal, but we unfortunately ended up under the Witness Protection Act. Wow. So every couple of months or so, we would have to move. So my growing up is every 2 months move.
Oh my gosh.
When I was 9 years old, there was one man that wasn't caught that ended up murdering him in front of me. And then there was another man that actually escaped prison to kill my family, so I wish I could tell you I had a normal life growing up. I tried to make it that way for myself. But that was pretty horrific,
I guess.
But,
I had no idea. This is something we never discussed.
Yeah, well, I don't talk about it often because of, evidentiary support, but turns out my mother passed away a few years ago, and she had a whole, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and I was a little upset with her for not telling me a lot of things, but I understand,
Sure.
But yeah, I pretty much grew up pretty angry by my teenage years. I'm a laid back guy now, a nice guy now, but that thing kind of does things to a child until you
I guess.
heal from that kind of thing. I did therapy and all that stuff. I've always been a well-rounded kid and adult. I'm the guy that people go to for advice. But yeah, I suspect I'm not going to know everything about that. But at least I learned enough to relax when I sit down. I mean,
About how old were you when, I don't know if you ever feel clear of an event or series of events like this, especially as a young person actually witnessing a murder. And I'm really glad to know that you had therapy in those intervening years. But about what point in your youngish life did you feel you were beginning to mm, get away from all of these very intense childhood memories and begin to create a life for yourself free of these things?
I was about 16. I emancipated, got myself an apartment. I was one heck of a grocer. Actually, years later, Walmart picked me up because they had this idea of super centers, so I helped design those. It was then, I was out away from family. I could make my own decisions. I can relax my shoulders, and found my own way. And
At this point in your life, did you have something you could get away to, whether it was a hobby or reading around a certain subject or just something that you're able to focus your attention on, and let your imagination run a little wild and maybe think about, a productive future and doing something that you really value doing?
as a kid, uh, I guess we all want to be rock stars. I bought a guitar, saved up, extra payments at the pawn shop until I brought it home. But that was a great escape for me, music, and I enjoyed music very much. And on the side, of course, we did in the '80s martial arts, and so I got a third degree black belt, and that kept me from using my aggression the wrong way. And I think that kind of steered me off that highway and onto a better one with self-discipline, meditation, and respect. So,
Wow.
so that really sent me in the right direction.
How old were you when you first became a dad, give or
Oh,
take?
that is a tricky question, actually. I met an older woman. Um, I actually fell in love with her kids first. They had no money, holes in their clothes. You could tell they were hungry, and they were just excited to get a Happy Meal going through the drive-through, instead of a dollar sandwich or something. So I just fell in love with watching them, have an extra kind of freedom around me. So eventually, it was time to pop the question. She had 3 children, and I had learned she was pregnant with our child. And I think I was 23 years old at the time.
A
We
lot
were
of responsibility to take on at that
it,
age,
it
at
was
any age.
at any age. It was. But uh, I didn't know much about love. I really didn't um, know that feeling in totality. I knew of it. I knew sort of the essence, but once you work a hard day and come home and see those faces smiling and just everything was family, something I didn't know about. So that was home for me. But unfortunately, I think 10 years later, their mom had a bit of a psychotic break. She didn't tell me she has those problems or addiction problems. So eventually I ended up before the judge, and the judge wanted me to raise all 4 kids. So I did.
Wow. Eric, at about, let me ask first, how were you making a living to raise these kids during this period of time?
Oh, sometimes working at 3 jobs and something to generate income at home. But in the beginning, it was the Walmart super centers. We were designing and building the first ones right here in Arkansas. I'm sure you
Yeah.
don't want the whole history lesson there.
No.
But I, a funny story, Pete. I don't know if it's funny or sad, But when I first started learning how to be a stalker, the old school stocking groceries,
Sure.
my um, my supervisor was a speed stalker. And I don't know if you remember those, but they could take the lid off a box in less than a second. It is so fast and so efficient.
Wow.
It's I wish we still had it here in America. And what I didn't know was my supervisor that was teaching me how to speed stock was on methamphetamines.
Oh, geez.
So I would come home every day feeling like I just got hit by a truck trying to
Yeah.
keep up with this man. And
Geez.
yeah, I finally found out that I was good enough after all.
Amen. Um, Up to this point in your life, had anything entered it to cause you to have any interest in UFOs and their implications for humanity or the paranormal in general?
Um, Almost nothing. I would have dreams that would come true, and I would tell my mother about them. Just a fun little game, and we would both watch them kind of come true. And she would always stop me from acting that way in front of other people. So it was always, don't mention that, don't pay attention to that.
Sure.
So there was something there, but I was told it's not acceptable. You can't be that way. I was as a young child, I was very empathetic and very heartfelt. My grandfather called me an old soul, but I didn't realize how different I really was until I grew up and raised children of
Yeah.
my own, So, and I could never imagine being the person I am now to stop a child from being who they are,
Yeah.
you know. We kind of goose stepped ourselves into this painted reality, and we've left a lot of pixels out of it. And when it comes to humanity, there are children that are born that are highly gifted, and we make it go away through non-acceptance and societal standards.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of depression, a lot of hurt within a child. So you're kind of split in two. You've got one half of yourself that you hide all the time, or learn how to forget about and go about your life.
Well said. When did either of these subjects intrude for the first time into your reality? And can you tell us a bit about the particulars?
Yeah, when you're a single dad, I just had the divorce. I actually had to move out into a small apartment with the kids, and the judge gives her the house. I don't know how that works, but divorce is funny. So we're in this tiny apartment, and I've just got to get away. And when you're a single parent, you hide in the bathroom, or you go out in the car and you hide out there. You could buy yourself at least a few minutes. And I go outside in daily frustration of holding everything together, minute by minute, not day by day. And I laid on the hood of my car and I had a smoke and closed my eyes for a moment. And all of a sudden, it felt like right here, I felt it's almost like someone had a big finger and popped me on the forehead.
Hmm.
And immediately, all I saw was this bluish portal looking tunnel thing. And I felt myself going through it very quickly. The moment I could feel my body, I jumped up off the car and I literally ran inside, scared out of my mind. I didn't want to look left. I didn't want to look right. I felt as if there was a presence, and I've never hallucinated before. I've never done drugs.
Hmm.
I've had alcohol, but it couldn't have been real, and so I kind of grabbed my daughter's computer without much ability of how to use it. I'm one of those guys. But all I found was a bunch of conspiracy theories, and ended up going to bed quite late. And I woke up the next morning, and I was standing outside of my apartment. I had no idea how I got there, and I remember my eyebrows just squeezing together, like, what the heck? My left shoulder's facing my front door, and my right shoulder's facing the dead end street. and I noticed this glow. So I turned my head, and here this thing is just over the street. It wasn't in the sky. It was just over the street, 40 feet in diameter, uh, glowing orange reddish sphere, and it was rippling like the sun.
Whoa.
But it wasn't bobbing or weaving or anything like that.
About
And
what time was this, Eric?
it was about 4 o'clock in the morning because it
Wow.
was 4:19, 4:20 when I walked into the front door.
Okay.
And I stood there for about 20 minutes just looking at this thing. And I'm thinking, because the light, Peter, was not, it was so bright, but it did not illuminate anything around it. The wet
Interesting
street,
distinction. Yes.
the wet street below should have been beaming with light, the sides of the apartments. I mean, that's the part that really didn't make sense. So now your mind starts to move, is
Yeah.
that a blown transformer? Is that ball lightning? Is that, all these things go through your mind. Um, and I think after, making coffee, turning on the TV to see if there's any strange weather going on outside, I left the door open and I kept leaning, you know, uh, just so I can see out the front door and look at it. And sure enough, it's just still there, rippling. And I wasn't sure what to do, you know. And the last thought in my mind would be UFO, because in my mind, a UFO would be like a silver disc on hanging from a fishing string in a 1950s film, right?
Mhm.
And so that's my conception of what a UFO was. So I definitely didn't think that. But eventually, it was, in my mind, it became an optical illusion. There's a piece of glass somewhere and some light bouncing off of this. And
Sure.
boy,
There's
am I
got to
gonna,
be an explanation that
yeah.
logical.
Oh boy, am I going to laugh at myself when the sun comes up and I figure this whole thing out, you know.
Yeah.
But the sun came up, and I rushed to the door to see what it looked like in the daytime, and it was gone, just immediately gone. I mean, it didn't even have time to leave. Um, but yeah, I walked the grass. I walked, everywhere. I couldn't find any explanation for what that thing was. And of course, I've got to go to work. So I spend the day quiet thinking about whatever this thing was. I seemed to be really affected um, by it, and I wasn't sure what that meant, you know. But anyway, you get out of work, you go to the grocery store, you pick out a recipe to cook with the kids because they're old enough to teach, them how to cook now.
Good.
And so we do that. We do homework. We do the Pixar film. We giggle. We laugh. I tuck everyone in, and I go outside at night for my nightly smoke. And so I'm pacing the one-story apartment back and forth, thinking, now I can focus my mind on this again. It was just right there.
Right.
It left no evidence. I mean, if I tell anybody, I'm going to sound like a crazy person. And just when I got finished with my smoke, I looked up in that spot, and maybe 30 to 40 feet higher than what it was that morning, it was this big, and it turned on very slowly all the way to 40 feet in diameter.
Whoa.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, and it slowly goes completely out, completely black, and slowly back on. And then it's almost like a machine let it go, but it starts going about 2 miles an hour, very slow, very fast, blinking completely off. And you can tell there was a object blacker than the night sky within whatever this light was. When the light went out, I couldn't see what shape it was, but it was blacker than black. And this thing continued, and it did a complete horseshoe stalking type of maneuver slowly around me. When you make a red wasp really mad, they'll start to kind of circle and observe you. And that's kind of what it felt like. It's that dog dangerous. You want to pull up your elbow and kind of get in an odd defensive position.
Yeah.
But it was intelligent, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is intelligently controlled. So it finally ended up just above my one-story apartment, above my door, maybe 15, 20 feet from my face.
Oh
And
my
my knees lock up. Like if you ever scare a goat, Peter, that's what happened to my knees. I couldn't move them. They just locked up, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't feel any, in this instant, I didn't feel any vibration, no heat, no sound. I felt nothing, as if this thing was not there. It should be making sound. It should be doing all kinds of things, but it's not. So all of a sudden, it flashed twice, really fast, and shot faster than a bullet off to my right. So I stood there with my knees unable to move, thinking the shock wave is going to tear me to pieces.
Whoa.
The air displacement is going to do damage from something that fast. I felt nothing. So I literally duck walked into my apartment, closed the door, and locked the deadbolt, because that's what keeps us safe, is the deadbolt. But it was my thinking at the time.
Sure.
But the next day, I was coming home. My car was overheating. So single dad with a broken car, not a good day for me. So my friend Dan, he lived just across from me. We checked the mail together. We would have a beer occasionally. Great neighbor. Eddie Murphy personality all the way. Southern black man. If he's in the room, everyone knows about it, and to know him is to love him. And he came over, and we're checking the hoses, and we find out it's the water pump. It's the $400 part. But he went in the house, came out with a beer, and handed it to me. And he said, "You know what? Just put your grace in God. You've been through everything in your past. You'll go through this. You'll be fine." Give me a big man hug. And he went to go inside because his wife, Laura, Southern cooking. Oh my gosh. It's just amazing cooks. So I went back to grab that beer. It was on the hood of my car. And I'm going to drink this thing, I mean, one beer is not drunk legally, and I don't, if the kids fall down or something, I wouldn't be able to take them to the hospital, but I can have that one beer, a little stress going on.
Sure.
But when I stepped back, I was standing on my shoelace. So I literally untied my shoelace, and I'm thinking, great, can something go right today? So I go down and I'm tying my shoe. And I feel this very light, almost not noticeable vibration on the top of my head. And I thought maybe I'm getting the chills or just kind of blew it off. But within a split second, it's almost like someone turned the dial all the way up. So if you know what it's like to be at a rock concert and your chest is being vibrated by these large speakers, if you can imagine that times a million aimed right here on your head.
Whoa.
I went down. I felt, try to get into that moment. My whole body was micro vibrating extremely fast. I knew I was throwing up because my throat would open and close itself. So I knew I was throwing up, and that's how I could tell. I felt as if I was a piece of metal under a magnet, because my jeans were scooting back and forth, maybe an inch or two left and right. And I was so confused and disoriented, and I thought I was being killed. That's the only thought I could push through my mind. This is it. So I push away from the concrete, and it did feel like a magnetic push from the ground. And I pulled my head back to look up to see where this is coming from. And here's this object. There's our surprise guest. And so it flashes twice like it did the night before, and shot the opposite direction it did the night before. And so I strange thing was, it was daytime when it started, and it was already nighttime once the vibration stopped.
Oh my.
And I'm like now people criticize my thinking in this moment, and it doesn't sound credible, but for me, it took about 20 minutes to get to my door, because I felt like a scared animal. I get hyper vigilant. I'm listening to see if this thing is that fast and just tried to kill me. I don't have time to make it to that front door. So I'm listening to every sound, hyper vigilant, and waiting for my moment to make a break for it, to the front door, because somehow my front door would make me safe from something like this. But yeah, I noted that my nose had been bleeding and my left ear was bleeding. My eyes were blurry. couldn't see very well, and my skin was like a sunburn all over my skin. So I got into the bathroom because I was going to throw up again. I was so overheated. Felt like a heat stroke is what it felt like. But I almost made it to the toilet, and that cold floor, my old best friend from my 20s, the bathroom cold floor, felt so good. I just passed out right there, you know. So I woke up the next morning. I was covered in blood. I was covered in vomit. I fully clothed, got in the shower, and just laid there and turned the water on until the hot ran out. And so that was basically my introduction into these things. And it wasn't maybe a week, 2 weeks after that, I found Peter Robbins and gave him a call. I didn't know what to do.
Had you read or heard of anything like this in your life before?
No, I never looked into the subject. You know, you grow up where people just call these people conspiracy theorists and they're crazy. And so you hear it enough times, you start to believe it. So in social circles, you've got that one person that's a believer, you just kind of walk away, you know, which I feel really bad about because now I am that conspiracy person. But it wasn't overnight. It took me a long time to accept it. I was literally, Peter, I was trying to convince myself I had a brain tumor, or maybe I had a stroke, or maybe I got schizophrenia in my family line, and it just now started to happen. So I'm just playing in my mind how to get rid of this, you know, how to make it go away.
You know, you and I had similar but different experiences and in very different time frames. You basically know my and my sister's story. At 14, this unambiguous daylight sighting, which was so overwhelming to me that it became my repressed memory from childhood, although I do joke sometimes to say if I have other repressed memories, I don't remember them. But that stayed nicely under the garbage can lid for more than 14 years with a brief exception. And that feeling of emerging after the kind of experience that you had, which was far more unpleasant than my memory returning, but still that shock of, I must be having some kind of mental aberration. There's definitely something wrong with me because there's no way, logically, I could have ever forgot the most extraordinary thing I ever saw in my life. In my case, also, I was fortunate in a sense that I had a witness who could verify the basics of that experience. But like you, I would say, I was going to say overnight, but instantaneously, I was in a very unfamiliar world. Things that I knew that I had either intuited from the adult world or that I had logically made up my very sophisticated Leave It to Beaver mind were the way things were and weren't. All of a sudden, I'm looking at, as you were experiencing, something that I knew wasn't true, and yet there they were. It's a lonely place to be, especially for an individual like you or I that had no contact with the subject or any individuals in our lives that were interested in it. We didn't know there were UFO conferences or organizations, you know, until we were able to find out there were. But it's kind of like a BC AD moment in our lives that we count back and we count forward from, is the way I think about it. And our lives are defined by moments like this. Weddings and funerals are two good examples, but falling into this world, either through having an experience and remembering it or having it returned, dials are reset and you're kind of starting again and not necessarily liking that fact in a certain area of your experience.
It's terrible.
I had forgotten about the timeline, that it was so shortly after this experience that you and I connected and then met in real life for the first time in Portland, Maine, at the wonderful Experiencers Speak conference, I guess the first one. Um, it's a part of my past too, your experience in that sense and connecting with you at that point. How did you kind of make the move from kind of being under the thunder of this particular experience and transition in some way to an individual who is out there actively helping, working with ultimately a huge number of people around the world? That doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen accidentally. What was that transition period about, and how was it? How did you handle that and continue again to be a single dad, earn a living, and not be overwhelmed by this new world, in a sense, that you had become part of, not willingly?
Very, very new world. Very new world. The morning after I was knocked down, and the reason why I tried to blame my brain for so many things is that I didn't know what savant syndrome was, and that's what I was going through at the time. So a lot of people can't imagine me speaking in a slow Southern draw, having a very limited vocabulary, almost no education whatsoever. So my brain got put on hyperdrive, so all I could do was just consume as much information. And it really, most of it wasn't even about UFOs. It was just piling through books and learning about nature and animals and symbiotic circles and how does a cell work. So all of a sudden I became fascinating things that I would have never looked at. The old me would have just be happy to go fishing once a day, but it got to the point where my neighbors were moving out. There's this DOD guy down the street taking pictures of my kids and everything that they were doing. Lieutenant Colonel Dallas C. Wood, Department of Foreign Relations and Foreign Technology. Oh, wait a minute. That was a name, wasn't it? But my neighbor Debbie was a porter at his hotel. So she actually went into his room to clean, and there were pictures of me and the kids all over the bed and a ledger on the nightstand of everything we did, a daily routine. So my first thought is, I've got daughters, so this guy's stalking my kids. That was my first thought. I had no idea that, it was a precursor into a sci-fi movie that I'm actually going to live. But I couldn't handle it, Pete. To be honest with you, I've been a strong guy my whole life, but I just could not take it with savant syndrome, the activity happening all the time. The church kicked me out. I had rows of cars and trucks leading all the way to my front door every night because the whole town wanted to see these things. We called the police once. The cops got out, looked at the object, got back in the car, and left. There's no help. You just feel helpless. I went to a pawn shop. I bought a little 380 handgun. I got some bullets, loaded it. And I waited for the kids to go to bed. I was going to go out to the car because I didn't want my own children to find my body. But right in the middle of my final thoughts in life, my phone rings and it's Bear. And we ended up having a 4-hour conversation. I didn't tell him that I was going to kill myself. Suicidal people, they don't want other people to know. They really don't.
That's right.
And so in that conversation, we had laughs, we had a bond. There was so much confirmation with electromagnetic field readings, gaugometers. He was telling me about everything that they picked up. And he said, this is a huge case, Eric. You don't know. And don't get involved with anybody in ufology yet, because that could be a storm you're not ready for. And I wasn't. Oh my gosh, Pete, I wasn't. So he really protected me.
Good.
I spent a year at his home, and he would teach me about intuitive, how it works, teaching me about my experiencer side. What does it mean to be me? So he was a great mentor, a great friend, and he pulled me through a lot of things that I don't think he knew he was pulling me through, But Kentucky is a tough redneck, and he had his gun on his hip for sure, so a lot of discipline. He would literally wake me up at 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning, not tell me where we're going, and I would have to just deal with the day. There was one day he brought me to the Nashville airport, just over the border, handed me a plane ticket, and told me good luck. So I fly to California. I get picked up by a car. I still don't know where I'm going, and it turned out to be a conference where I was speaking. So so he did. He literally told me, we do have, this UFO situation, but sometimes people are the bigger problem, and you've got to be ready for that. And so it was a combination of a lot of things, but I got this excuse to move away from my neighborhood and leave it all behind, every bit of it.
Wow.
I left the furniture. My daughter got accepted to college in Maine. So I thought, I'm going to pack up the kids, leave most of my stuff behind, and I am just going to go to Maine, walk away from every bit of this, get out from under the cloud. So, and Bear told me, he said, Eric, you can go to Mars. It's not going to go away, and I thought, no, a couple thousand miles away, I'll never see that thing again, and mind you, there were abduction experiences going on, lots of scars, still have them. My daughter's pediatrician, sorry about the motorcycle outside, was very concerned about the markings on my body, my daughter's body, and my son's body. It was, I won't even say it on air, but it was pretty horrific, and multiple scoops to the point where you couldn't identify from my shoulder to my elbow as a human arm. It was that bad. During the summertime, we would have to wear long sleeve shirts because it would take maybe a month or so for these things to pop open and start bleeding, because the skin is so dehydrated that it wouldn't pus or bleed, so it was just, wow. I don't get into that much because I'm still trying to process all that. And it's only been 13 years.
Eric, when did you first approach a scientist or a medical person? That had to be quite a line to cross. A professional, not emotionally involved in this subject. But when did you first make contact with somebody in that category, and what was it that brought you to make the decision to do that?
Peter, I call it the hidden hand. It's almost like something is writing your life and you just fall in every single convenient basket in front of you.
Yeah.
But I got a call from an experiencer in 2014. So now I've got a year experience, and I was hot stuff too. I had worked with 3 people, so I knew what I was doing. Oh, we grow up. But I got a call from a guy by the name of Ray Hernandez.
Oh, sure.
And he was a tax lawyer, a tax attorney in Florida, and he was having a hard time. And just like when I called you, I heard the same voice over the phone and knew exactly that there was something going on. So Ray and I became friends. We spent a lot of time talking throughout that year. I noticed he was in the mashed potato mountain syndrome when we first met. And I'll tell you why I call it that. Close encounters of the third kind, where you completely get obsessed from having this experience. And you kind of leave out the family, the children, the job gets less done. Things are falling apart and you're not noticing because you're hyper vigilant, focused on what the heck is going on here, So I've seen it destroy marriages. I've seen it destroy families. And so now I involve families when I need to, when working with an experiencer. But we ended up on a 3-way call with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, that's 6 Men on the Moon, and had a few beers just as guys talking about these experiences. And Edgar was extremely philosophical, off to the side, in person. So he and I, engaged in an awful lot of that. But we had a few drinks one night, and I think it was Ray Hernandez popped off. We need to get this into academia. And I turned my head as if I was looking at someone in the room, because I'm on the phone with these guys. And I'm like, it's not in academia yet? What do you mean? 80 years and there's no academia. So we kind of concocted a little bit of an idea. Let's do a scientific study. Their job was difficult. Come up with 20 PhDs that were willing to conduct the experiment. And basically my job was to get my hands on any experiencer I could, verify that they actually were an experiencer. That way it could be verified information, and then lend them enough trust to go online and actually do this thing. And you can imagine that's hyper busy. So I got Starborn support group involved, Audrey Hewins, which was Travis Walton's girlfriend at the time. I think when we met you out there, we all three lived together, me, Audrey, and Travis. That was a well-rounded household, right? But yeah, I stuck my head to the ground and I stayed busy on that, and I kind of quietly watched it launch pretty well. And so, I thought if I could do that, maybe I can do this with academic people. Now that we have all these pie graphs and charts and real tangible evidence, 86% Rh negative blood, that's way too high. There's something there, there's something to look at. So I did get a hold of a Harvard scientist. I don't give out some of these people's names, but I was in touch with Dr. Gary Nolan in 2013, explaining my savant syndrome through email, and he was a lot of help, trying to explain things, even though he used too big of words for me at the time. But he was also very busy, extremely busy guy, but he's gotten a lot done over the years. So I kind of pipeline information to several, and it kind of took its own, it took on itself. I mean, it started with one email chain, and then, conversations happen, and you'll see more people add to the email chain. And then you'll have people like, University of Ohio, a couple of electrical engineers that say, well, I want to see the email chain. What information are you guys sharing? And so it just kept going, where, now you have, other countries involved, and, different doctors. And we're not saying whole departments or whole colleges. We're just saying every, person that's kind of interested in studying this behind the scenes kind of jumped aboard as fast as possible. So I was able to network these people together using social media and opening conversations that otherwise wouldn't have been done, and lending the knowledge I have with personally working with these people. They wouldn't know our commonalities. They wouldn't know our habits. It is incredible to know that an African man in a grass hut fished extra, grew extra grain, spent months in methodical thought to get to a nearby city and reach out to somebody that knows about the light birds trying to get him at night. And that's what he called it, the light bird. He had no reference. He's never owned a television, He built a separate grass hut from his wife and kid, and to keep that away from them at night, and it's just, you see his habits, everything about him was a quintessential medical experiencer, and he had never been exposed to another experiencer in his life. So that was a great one to kind of model, see, we're not all influenced to be who we are. It's an internal thing, so when I go to support groups to help people, it was always story time. And I would always say, no. This is an internal thing more than it is an external thing. What goes on inside of us is an exact replica, and, for psychology not to pick up on this is a little upsetting, but I'm working on that as well.
That's a perfect point for us to cut away. We have just blown through our first hour. This is Peter Robbins and my special guest, Eric Mitchell. We will be back in 5. Join us back here at 8 o'clock sharp. And we are back. And we are back. I am back. Eric will be back shortly. Again, last weekend's events in New Hampshire were really a conference high point for me this year, being that it was raising money for this wonderful purpose of scholarships for students. And Eric, before we kind of pick up on the story again, I want to kind of jump ahead, which is that we last saw each other the end of May, beginning of June, in legendary Palm Springs, California, where we were both speakers at Contact in the Desert. Is this an event that you had attended before? Because it was a first for me.
No, that was my first time. I try not to take too much of the popular route, so much competition and infighting, and I just try to concentrate on my work. And if I see something that can really help the cause, then I'll speak. So I saw that as a great opportunity. We're doing working on a documentary. And it doesn't cover everything, of course, but it is a great start into what it's like to go through all of this, from 0 to 60. And so I think the guys, Ben and Joe from UFO Garage podcast, actually not even a film crew, just wanted to do some interviews by phone and kind of put it out there. People need to know what this is about. And I agreed. I said, sure, we'll do that. And before you know it, the guys started making phone calls to every one of my contacts, verifying all these crazy stories I have, because they're hard to take in. I've been busy. So once they verified so many things, they were blown away. They said, there's no way we're going to film this with a cell phone, so they bought a rather expensive camera, movie quality, and put together a film crew and went on the hunt. I've done some interviews in there. They interview some great people. I'd love to have you on the next one if we had the chance. But it turned out pretty well, and we debuted it at the Contact in the Desert. And it should be ready for launch within the next, I think, 4 months or so. So people should look out for that if you're interested in what that's like. But yeah, it's just crazy happenstance. That's all it was. I did spend a year on the phone with a Netflix person that wanted to write a huge check, to do something. I couldn't believe the contract. I'm looking at all those zeros and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can help a lot of people with that money. But the problem is when things are not scary enough for them to put on television, they want to change what happened to you. And so things started to change and I'm saying, no, that's a lie. We can't put that out. I spent 8 months living with Travis Walton. Everywhere he goes, he gets backed into the wall about fire in the sky. And so a great friend, a great man, also taught me that lesson. Do not do that because you're going to be stuck with it for the rest of your life. And so I stayed away from that, and we found a better way. It's never been about money or fame, but education. And to lie is not to educate, So had to walk away from all those zeros and ended up doing this project.
Let's go back again to where we were 2013, 2014, when you're starting to make contact with other people who are experiencers. When you mentioned Ray Hernandez, I guess I met Ray about the same time you did. And he, of course, became deeply involved in documenting cases of people who had abduction and the kind of experiences you document so well. And for me, it was watching the work that he and his colleagues were doing was a reminder to me of, one can argue, one of 2 points: either that there are different intelligences interacting with us to produce different results, or we human beings differ enough based on our backgrounds and our conditioning and our philosophies that people can have similar events happen to them, but one person will react in a very positive way and see it as a learning experience, where another person will be intimidated or frightened and see it as something less than that. Ray and his team have documented a great number of positive experiences that people have had, and in many cases put them on a path, not unlike yours in terms of wanting to be a positive force out there in the universe. I get concerned when I see folks negating somebody else's experience because it was entirely different than theirs, or saying, how could you have had a good experience when I had a bad experience, or opposite. We're dealing with, everybody is kind of fine-tuned differently, and no matter what people empirically state about what they think they believe they know about the intelligences they're dealing with, for me, the mantra is reality doesn't care what we believe. It's just doing its reality thing, and we interpret it in different ways. For me, one of the best examples is the parable about the 6 or 7 blind men and the elephant. One has his hands wrapped around a leg, another one's working on the trunk, another one's holding on to the tail, another one a tusk, another an ear, and they are having quite an argument about what is the elephant, and all the others are wrong because you know what the elephant is about because you're holding on to a piece of it. Well, they're all right, of course, but to get to that point, sometimes can be quite a philosophical argument before people give up ownership of confusing what they absolutely may believe with what is absolutely going on, and that we may be wrong in our perceptions, and not to get too wound up about it, because this is all about the unknown. Bud Hopkins, who really should be regarded as the central pioneering figure in the start of the scientific investigation of the phenomena and abduction phenomena we're talking about, had a wonderful dark sense of humor sometimes. And we, as you know better than most people, Eric, we have to be skeptics, especially because we no longer have the luxury of disbelief. For you as an experiencer, for me as a close observer over hundreds and hundreds of cases, starting with my sisters. And the difference between a skeptic and a debunker is all the difference in the world. Again, people like us need to begin every investigation at the baseline, so to say, and not assume that people are necessarily having the experience they've described, and that we jump right onto it and accept it because we know that such things happen. A debunker is somebody, in my mind, who knows that we're wrong. Why? Because it's nonsense. And if it was true, I'd know it because I'm a fairly sophisticated person with contacts and, a happening kind of guy. So I need to dismiss you, little pat on the head there, and what a charming imagination you have, confused with reality, which is outrageous and arrogant beyond belief, and the norm for many folks. It can't be, therefore it isn't, therefore it's something else, and it's my self-assigned job to explain to you in pseudo-scientific terms what I know it is, when in reality I don't really know. But if you're right, that means all those certificates on my wall and all of the other, associate professors who think I'm a big deal because I have more papers published than they do, are in the same spot that we were when we kind of went through that door of, oh, wait, are you saying everything that I thought I knew is open to question? I'm not very comfortable. I would rather make you wrong and everybody like you, because I don't like what's going on.
Right, right. I treat it like a restaurant. I built a restaurant across the street from the school with my kids, and it turned out to be a very healthy family project, and it was right across, from this, so all the kids were just thought my kids were cool because you can get free ice cream, and so we had a great time. But what you're saying, it reminds me of building this restaurant, because in my mind, I had it set in stone. The oven's going to go here. I'm going to hang my favorite spatula just above right here, and everything is just going to work out exactly the way I imagined it. But in application, the restaurant has something to teach you, that spatula doesn't go there. We can't put, the piping for the stove in this spot. It has to be over here. So it's teaching you as you go. And
Yeah.
if you submit to that and not have all the answers, but have some, if you submit to what it has to teach you and be willing to learn, then I think you're going to get a lot more answers that way, But a lot of people have this. I always picture a quilt in my mind, grandma's quilt with all the individual squares. Once your worldview looks like that and it's torn in so many different pieces, you have work tomorrow, you have school tomorrow, you've got to put it together. So now it's got duct tape and super glue and all kinds of stuff in the wrong spot, and that's how they live the rest of their life, with a broken worldview, because they don't want to revisit that, and so it's a slow, grueling process to get there,
Speaking about slow processes, Eric, how did you go from the point of view of being there for someone to being there for 3,000 someone's? That's a
I,
lot of territory.
well, it's the same as the kitchen, I never posted a website or advertised. I just attended a lot of support groups. I saw a lot wrong that needed to be right. And I was just determined to help these people. And by the time I got to my first suicidal person, I was so shaken by it. I was so rattled by it, thinking how many people out there are killing themselves right now because some other people can't accept reality. That is just unbelievable, And I stopped doing phone calls because I realized face to face, FaceTime over the phone gives you a lot more information that I never even thought about. So I had a guy call me from the Philippines, Bulacan, uh, and he was going through a hard time. His sister was going through a hard time, and they're in the province. There's no money. They have their chickens and bananas and coconuts, and they survive like camping, like what we would call camping. And luckily, they speak some English, if not a lot of English over there, thankfully. But I was just so fascinated by the culture and what does this thing do and what does that do. So I start to get more involved and falling in love with more cultures. What is that food? What is this? So I can't really quite explain it, but it gave me a deeper involvement with other experiencers, and that's when I thought to myself, wow, I can do this in a different country now, maybe I can do it more. But it was, Peter, at the end of the day, sheer reputation that kind of sparked out all over the world. I'd never advertised. I don't charge people money. It's just an act of humanity, one human being to the next, that's going through, something that you understand. And next thing you know, I'm learning about Uzbekistan. I've never heard of Uzbekistan, but it turns out if you drop your bread in Uzbekistan and it lands upside down, you are cursed for 7 days. And that's
Yeah.
why UFOs go to Uzbekistan. I learn something new every day. So it turns out it's not just 7 days with UFOs, but that a lot of countries have their little quirks that are kind of neat. But that's one of them for there. And it just kept spreading word of mouth. The more I worked with people, the word of mouth came out. So now support groups are saying, "Oh God, you're suicidal. Let me get you in touch with Eric," because they're not sure how to deal with it. They can have support groups, but when a life is on the line, not many people want to deal with that, and I don't want anybody else dealing with it because I can do the job. I've done this a lot now, but yeah, it's over 130 countries now, and I have fallen in love with so many cultures. It's just unbelievable.
Can you give us a few examples of the kinds of experiences or variations on experiences that some of the folks who have gotten in touch with you from different countries, different cultures have reported to you?
Well, it usually starts off with a strange light in the sky. Um, and these are people that weren't born that way. There are experiencers that are born, they know it their whole life. Their parents told them to hide it. People like myself and like you, there's a light in the sky. It's definitely not a plane. It's not a planet. It's coming closer, and they realize that this is sentient something. And within the first week, they start to notice their intuition picking up. This is not something that a lot of people talk about, but your intuition starts to pick up. You tend to have more empathy. Now, this is actually not um, a worldview change. A lot of people just think it's a worldview change and they're somehow different, but this is neurological. Your brain is rewiring itself. I've heard people suspect that there's this electromagnetic field is interacting with the brain without us knowing it in the beginning. But there is a change there. I think Dr. Gary Nolan, he worked mostly with Havana syndrome, brain scarring, but I know some other folks that are literally seeing this change where you can end up with up to 100 billion neurons within motor function that size. So your whole brain has 100 billion neurons, right? So you're growing 100 billion neurons in this tiny spot, and it's so active that it's ridiculous. And the older models of MRIs would pick up brain scarring in that area, but now if you have a Tesla machine, contrast 4, high contrast, level 4, you can nail that sucker and see it, and it's just an incredible amount of brain activity. So the responsibility of empathy, intuitive ability, synchronicity and coincidence, and the fourth and final non-locality happens within activity of that part of the brain. So that's why we seem to be more spiritual, more intuitive, more empathic, because that part of your brain is going through that change or already has. And it's suspected that there's a random nucleotide polymorphism within the epigenetic DNA of the quintessential experiencer that actually switches on during trauma and starts to feed into that part of the brain. The problem is it doesn't know how to turn off. We have epigenetic DNA that gets us ready for wintertime, and we'll eat a bunch of turkey and pack down some pounds to get our body ready for winter. That's just an epigenetic that switches on and switches off when it's finished, but this one doesn't seem to switch off. It keeps going. So when people say, I'm going to walk away from this subject, I just tell them, good luck. I'll see you in a week.
Eric, do you have any bead on or a sense of how people in the greater experiencer community, what they think of opinions concerning all of the activity that's going on the past few years in the House of Representatives, which, of course, has brought a great deal of legitimate attention to the subject of UFO inquiry and its implications, and at the same time is kind of a kabuki play, soap opera playing out for all of us to watch, be engaged in, but at the same time, it's engaging enough with the different whistleblowers coming in, different elected officials, different hearings, that it could probably go on for years and not, come to a point of revelation. And any sense of how folks in the experiencing community, what's their take on officialdoms continuing to take this more seriously and within the halls of government?
Well, we tend to be less hypnotized by the normal thing. I think my cat's about to photobomb us, but yeah, we're it's not easy to kind of trick us, unless we watch TV all the time. We don't get into that that form of hypnosis, where we have this little box in our room that tells us what to think, what to buy, what to wear, who to hate, and who to love, right? So it's harder to trick people like us, and for us, it does look like theater, but we also understand that it's necessary to kind of slowly dip people in the waters. It's not an easy thing. To believe is to be entertained. To know is to be destroyed. And so they're a million miles apart. And so you see the entertainment based mind acting accordingly, where the knowers are acting very different. People that are entertained by this are so deeply immersed in the entertainment aspect. You can literally see what's popular on TV today and then go outside and see what everyone's talking about. It's the same thing. That's why it's our programming, and so experiencers tend to see through that, and we tend to do our own thing while everyone else is at the water cooler talking about the famous touchdown. There's no flavor in that. There's none whatsoever. But I have achieved a lot of contacts through my reputation. I recently got a 7-hour phone call from a guy in the USO program, Office of Naval Intelligence, and I kind of thought I was in trouble because I am, Peter, I'm a bit of a rascal sometimes when I want to get things done. So I thought I might have stepped on the toes of national security, as I've done in the past. And the 7-hour phone call turned out to be a job interview for Alex at Skywatcher. So he introduced me to Alex, and we're having conversations now, along with some of the other psionics, and they're happy to be informed that I was trained already to do these things by my investigator, Angelia Shear, that graduated at Monroe Institute, the Night Stalkers. Shout out, guys! I learned so much from them. So let's see how that goes. I'll slowly dip my toes in those waters.
It seems to me over the past few years, as more and more has opened up within academia, the sciences, professional politicians, that the ridicule factor, as we know, has dissipated considerably. And we seem to be in this, I won't say post-ridicule era, but minimized ridicule compared to what it used to be. At the same time, it's, how can I say, it's as though almost there are levels of engagement with the unknown between leading figures in the professions. I remember when this has to be 2.5, 3 years ago, when Avi Loeb was first becoming a public figure. Yale, a Harvard professor of astronomy, of course, and more guarded than he is now, understandably. I took part in an interview with him, and the point that I was curious about was years before, 2000 or so, when John Mack had to defend himself as a continued credible professor at Harvard by going before the board and making it as real to them as it was to him that abductions happen. And he had a very good attorney, Daniel Sheehan, won the case. But as I even began to mention Dr. Mack's name, Dr. Loeb got very defensive. He thought that I was going to try to draw him out or ask a question about UFO abductions, a subject he understandably did not want to be associated with and really wasn't associated with. So with that as kind of a back thought, as things have continued to open in these other areas of investigation and professionalism, abduction has become even more a subject for media to try to keep away from and not take seriously, or to find ways to pull out the underpinnings. Fairly recently, we learned that Netflix is going to do a documentary on the Hill case, Betty and Barney Hill, but rather than go with a screenplay that was in great part developed along with Kathleen Marden, probably the world's leading scholar on the Hill case, and Betty and Barney Hill's niece, that Netflix instead chose to go with an over-intellectualization idea that it was all psychological due to the fact that they were, a mixed race couple, and I mean, incredibly insulting.
Wow.
The wonderful documentary that Randall Nickerson did on the Zimbabwe school case ran on Netflix and was countered by a documentary attacking it. I think, and I'm curious to know what you think, that we're going to be seeing more of this, because there's disclosure, and there's disclosure with all the really sticky parts: abduction, hybrid beings, missing pregnancies. Can we just talk about whistleblowers and tic tacs and things in the night sky? Your take on that?
Oh my gosh. How long's the show?
We're still got a good amount of time.
Good. It's a bit dark for me, Peter, from the things I've learned. I think first, no government or control system wants people to panic, knowing that they're not under the safety and guidelines of their government.
Correct.
Okay. So therefore, they do not want to talk about these things. But there is another factor. There are young kids that have notoriety of certain abilities. People sure are skeptical about that, but I've seen it all the time. I've seen me do it, so I know, that we just found out about the autism children that are extremely capable. And, I've known this for years, because every time I go into a grocery store and there's someone with autism, they have to come to me and they have to tell me their whole life story. And it's just, it's like a magnet thing. And, now scientifically, we know why, they're highly capable of these things in the brain, but there are children that get notoriety at a young age and then later on approached as an adult to sign up for these special projects. You get to go to a facility in Chihuahua, Mexico, where you can do stuff like the Monroe Institute, and the top floor seems kind of wonderful, like a dormitory with all kinds of new friends, and everybody understands you. You don't have to hide it anymore. Why not go? It's a good push to go. It seems like a betterment in life, but the more you achieve, the more you open up, and the more you learn, you go a floor down. And this is where you start getting certain medications to put your mind into a meditative state, where they can kind of ask you questions and receive things through whatever they want to call it, the Akashic records, or deep state meditations. And then there's the basement, where I've heard people die because they will keep you drugged and keep you under, while they're constantly trying to get you to produce as a golden goose. There's also a facility in Da Nang City, Indonesia, where highly advanced people are shipped to. And if you graduate that program, you work with kings, sultans, CEOs, you name it, powerful, rich people as an advisor, as a consultant, or whatever. I see it as a pet, which, it breaks my heart to know that the psychic spy programs that we had long ago led to the finding that we can utilize people, human beings, in this sort of manner. So, in a Cold War sense, they're not going to open the garage door on this project. It's still useful. It's still being used, and I'm sure Russia and China have, their hands on a pretty good amount of how to do that themselves.
Do you have any intuition on whether or not the current government will be the American government to either declassify or to fully disclose, or as close as possible, or that it'll pass to the next administration? Any special reason to believe one way or the other?
Um, Gosh, there's so many. I believe it's here. I believe it's here. You look at all the holes in the canoe. They're out of gum. They can't patch the holes anymore. We've got Hollywood disclosure movements. The academia alone will let you know. And I'd rather get disclosure from an academic and not a politician.
Yeah.
Academics, tell the truth at least half the time, right? So, but every time I see an opportunity to help disclosure along, I jump on it. I put off everything that I'm doing, and I nail it. So I know it's coming at us from every single direction. So I believe this will be the administration. We've got Anna Paulina Luna, Brichette, all these people in a special counsel, and they have to, by law, get this out. And we've got that hearing tomorrow. It may not amount to much, but it's moving. It's on its way. But furthermore, the most important disclosure that I see intuitively would be a personal disclosure, one person at a time. Catching a commercial with an alien on it and kind of doing a deep dive when they're bored some afternoon. And they just tend to go down that rabbit hole. They get bit by that UFO bug. That UFO bug, Peter, is our ally because it can bite anyone. And so behind the scenes with me, I see it all the time, whether someone is very upset because they just found out the truth, or they just found out the truth because the phenomenon wanted them to know about the truth. Either way, I get to watch personal disclosure on a close-knit basis up to 10 times a day. So it's like COVID. It's like a disease. It's spreading so quickly now. And it's almost up front in our programming, in our television now, that everyone is kind of looking into it a little bit for the first time as a serious situation. So I think it's rapidly advancing, from what I can tell, all over the world. I mean, I talked to a congressman in Japan last week, and he had experiences when he was a kid, starting to as an adult in his older years, and he wanted to know the emotional and mental implications of Japanese government actually telling their people that this is real. So that was a mind blower, to hear this man speak. Of course, I had to get a interpreter, but they always sound angry. But that wasn't the case. I kept asking her, "Is he angry with me?" And she said, "No, no, no, no." But being in a high position, you have to have a deeper voice and speak louder through your chest, in their culture. So it was fascinating that China's interested. France, Italy, Spain, Belgium. There's a lot of governments, Mexico, that are on board. So I don't see any way we can back out of this at all. There could be all the counterintelligence in the world, and people just aren't going to back out of this new reality.
I think you're right in terms of disclosure is both a process and, for some, an event to come from officialdom. But there's no question that the process is going on daily. It's not expanding geometrically, it's expanding arithmetically. Every day in different parts of the world, 1, 2, 7, 18, 3 people
Mm-hmm.
go through that door, either because of a sighting, an experience, deep intellectual curiosity, um, an account from somebody whose character and word they take seriously and don't question, or minimally. So that part of the process definitely is moving forward. Um, I sometimes wonder if we need to get to a tipping point, that X number of people in the room, so to say, are ready for this fully. Um, I usually take the point of view that most of the world's population is not quite ready for this, or not ready at all. I have friends and colleagues, I'm sure you do too, which is, sorry, it's time, get with the program. It's going to happen anyway. And, if you have some sleepless nights, that's the way it's going to be. Again, if your first concern is people, um, and as an empath, yours is, um, do you find sometimes a little frustration that things are not going quick enough, or just ride the horse in the direction it's going? And I'm part of the process, but we're not on a set time schedule.
Right. I'm not really ever really impatient unless I'm dealing with someone that's really falling apart. I think to myself, my God, our governments need to hurry up. There's too much suffering out there. But I understand the need to take your time and go slow. I went through the process too quickly, and it hurt a lot. But yeah, just being from Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's the Bible Belt. This is one of the last places in America that's going to believe that kind of stuff. And I was asked to leave the church. I was taunted at Walmart. I was, just everybody treated me badly back in 2013 because there was a big rumor saying I was calling the devil down from the sky. The next thing I was waiting for is torches and pitchforks at my front door. I mean, it got that bad. But I take off to Maine. I go to Las Vegas. I travel around. I come home 7 years later, and people are saying, "Hey, I just watched the new episode of Ancient Aliens. Can I buy you a beer?" So it's changed here. And so that'll let you know how rapid it's really going. And so in just 7 years, I think in the next two will be that just as strong as the last seven, as far as advancement into it. And it's just, I see people that would never even look into the subject, wearing a hat and a t-shirt with these things on it. So we're well on our way. If we got to take a few steps back when it comes to the great box in our room that knows all, then that's fine with me. But do I know it's coming? Yes. I'm already planning my retirement from dealing with all this. So,
Eric, how are your kids doing, and how are they doing with what you're doing? And, well, to add a third part of the question, what was their take on your process, so to say, of becoming a very public person in this work over the years?
they're all doing great. As adults, they are all professionals. My biological son joined the same military that let us down, and he's doing great in the Army. So that shows a lot of character right there. To be so angry with our government and then go fight, with our government later on. So that really shows a lot. They're all great. They're all professionals. They're all educated, and they didn't go through a hard time the way I did, because children are so much more open to the boogeyman and Santa Claus and the tooth fairy. So they were almost in excitement with some of these things that happen, but also mortified when you wake up in the morning and half the family has these deep markings that could never have been just my poor pediatrician. He had to pull me aside and say, "Eric, what is going on?" And I'm saying, "I don't know." He said, "Bugs aren't doing this. What is this?" So if I didn't know him and golf with him, he probably would be suspicious that I was doing something terrible, you know. But
Let,
he knows.
let's say right here for folks in our audience who are not aware of this, that one of the aspects of being taken or interfacing with non-human intelligences is you wake up the next morning, in most scenarios, and you have marks that were not there the night before. In some cases, they dissipate and go away. In others, they're there for good, especially what seems to be like tiny scoop marks, where really it's cauterized as it happens. In most cases, minimal, if any, blood flow. And of course, if you're completely unaware of this and a young person, a teacher may notice what looks like either a self-harm mark or, something God knows what. Parents have been called to question on this, and it's got to be a nerve-wracking aspect to negotiate this as a parent, and to do it in a way that doesn't freak out, these kids that you give your life for.
Hmm. That's the hardest part, is being a father and having the inability to protect your children.
Yep.
I mean, it just kills a man inside. You could buy all the guns you want and tripwires and cameras. You could do whatever you want, but there's no stopping that. And it's so difficult to believe abductions. Even for myself. I've got a laser incision from above my nipple all the way down below my belly button, and I woke up with it. I live with that scar, Peter. I see it in the shower every day. It's just a big reminder. And my doctor says, that's a laser incision, but why is it that long? And I said, well, I don't know. I've never had surgery. Never, but that's just, it's part of it, not being able to process those things. I'll tell you a really frustrating story. Dr. Roger Lear wanted to remove an object from the back of my neck. They were mostly interested in that one. It's a tiny
And we
metal.
should say right here that the late, great Roger Lear was a podiatric surgeon and a real pioneer in removing implants from people's bodies when it would show up in one way or another, or they would simply request it. A very important pioneer in this work.
Yes, very important, very important. He's underwritten for sure, and I'm still good friends with Dr. Steve Colburn. We speak, and so my friend and I, Heidi, we were going to the Soul Conference last year, and the Sunday before we flew out, I had this dream that I had kind of come to sitting on a metal bench, and I'm looking around, and there's a couple of Asian ladies sitting across from me, and a pretty big guy. He's about 250 pounds, lots of muscle. And he sits up and he's looking around, and I can see through a port window that there's stars. So in this dream, Peter, we're in space. And this guy's starting to come to, and he's looking outside, and he's just screaming now. Like, just out of his mind, just freaked out,
Sure.
And the ladies seemed to be completely out of it. No reaction. Their eyes were open, but there was no anything. And I start to kind of slowly think, oh my God, this is not a dream, And so I kind of, it'd be hard to explain to your audience, but there's a mental connection with these objects. So I kind of connected to it. It was outside of whatever this container we were in, and I was angry. I was very angry. Within a blink, I don't even know what happened. I'm on a conveyor belt, and this stuff is being sprayed on the top of my head, all the way down my face, down my neck, across my ears, and I'm out. I wake up the next morning. Wow, that was a weird dream. I fly out to the Soul Conference, and I told Steve and Barbara, I'll be out there if you want to hang out. And they said, of course. So they got a room at the same hotel as us. A bunch of experiencers showed up, which is great. Every time it's great to see so many. So we had a crowded hotel room, and Steve is checking everyone. There's a blue dye, substrate dye that can be found on the body with a UV light that is left over. Also a green dye, which is biological. The blue is more of a chemical composition, but the green dye that's left over is biological. But it doesn't have any chlorine in it, so it's not human, whatever it is. And so we are. I'm sitting off in the corner because I don't want to get looked at again. I've already had this dye on my body. They found the metal parts in me. I don't want to get looked at. And Steve finally said, "Eric, it's your turn." And he turns off the light, gets the black light, goes up and down my legs, my stomach, my chest, and then he gets to my face. And with a perfect straight line, a thick residue of blue dye was all over my face.
Oh my.
Completely covering it. He sat back with his jaw open, Peter, and said, "That's the most dye I've ever seen on one human being." And I was just, you can imagine it, just mortified that, and the worst part is there was a couple researchers that saw that, and we were at the Soul Conference the next day. So these ladies were running around, and I'm sure you know Nicole Sackage. They're running around trying to find one PhD to try to get a substrate sample of something that's obviously on my face, and nobody would do it. So, I thought, wow, that's it's frustrating, but even these PhDs aren't ready to know yet. But that was an awful lot of evidence I walked into this whole conference with, and nobody was interested in getting a good, clean sample for academic study. Very frustrating to learn you accidentally show up with empirical evidence on your face. Yeah.
You remind me earlier that over the years, I've spoken with men and women who were either remembering back to dealing with their own child or children during a taken event, or that they're now adults but remembering a childhood experience where they were taken and mom or dad was right there, but turned off or frozen, however one wants to see it. But the damage that can reverberate over decades of, you let them take me, and I've never, trusted you since. It's heartbreaking. And one can only imagine, you better than I, how devastating it is to not be able to protect or to even interface, or in some cases, to give a straight answer decades after the fact, because you've been wrestling it for all that time, and the rift between two people that should be as close as people can be, in some cases I've seen it as not repairable or very difficult to come back from. Other cases, understanding leads to forgiveness and healing, as it does in more conventional matters as well.
Yeah, me and the kids were close. They didn't really have a mother.
Yeah.
So I think those experiences really brought us a lot closer. I don't think there was any resentment. If there was, I don't think they would even tell me, but I did my best as a father. There's no such thing as a perfect one. But I made do with everything that I had, with, their best intention, and I'm proud of them. I really, I was going through hell, and they were just expanding their knowledge about this new reality called life as children. They still had, their neurology to grow, and mine was just set in stone, that this stuff isn't real. But now it's play putty.
I'm guessing, Eric, that they're equally proud of you as you are of them. You bet. As we move into our last few minutes here, First, any idea when the documentary film Experiencer may be made public for the first time and start to stream?
I'm told within the next 4 months, so it should be available on Roku TV and several other readily available platforms.
Great.
So the guys check in with me every once in a while because they're full time everything, and
Sure.
I've got to get sleep too. But they are hard at it. There's a few things they just need to change around as far as copyright and things of that nature, but just small problems to get out of the way. And
Well,
they've never done it before, so
gosh, do let me know when it starts to air, and we'll let our audience know as well. Um, Eric, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, either just to make contact or to have you work with them or answer some questions, how would they go about that?
uh, almost any app out there I have. There's certain apps that aren't allowed in certain countries. So I've learned. So I've had to get pretty much any app out there to contact. In America, is Facebook is just fine with me. And yeah, don't hesitate. I just had a guy with a TSS SCI clearance contact me, and he said I shouldn't be doing this, but something happened, and I need someone to talk to. So
Sure.
it's over paranoid people would say, "Oh, it's the CIA," but there's white hats in the game as well.
Sure.
There's people that
Absolutely.
do their job. You just got to know the wrong people and stay away from them. But yeah, I don't hesitate to reach out. I've pretty much seen it all, and I'm willing to help.
In social media, I'm guessing there are probably several Eric Mitchells out there. Where are you listed as residing now?
Uh, as far as where I live is at Hot Springs, Arkansas.
There we
But
go.
but
Okay.
yeah, I hop a plane at a moment's notice, so I may not always be here. But I'm always available via cell phone. Just contact me, and we'll have a conversation.
That's great, Eric. Where do you know when you'll be giving your next public presentation, either live or virtual?
Um, don't have anything lined up. I don't have anything lined up, but I just try to feel it out. If someone calls me about their conference and I get a good feeling about it, I'll do it. But if I don't, then I'll decline. But it's not public speaking is not my favorite thing to do. Um,
Well, you've overcome that
yeah, you were
brilliantly
master.
well.
Yeah, you were master of ceremonies the first time I was on stage. Remember that. And yeah, it's pretty difficult at first, but I got used to it. So now I can do it. It's just do I want to help represent particular people while doing it? So I kind of picky about it.
Well, needless to say, we could go on for hours more, but we are at the end of our time. Eric, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Eric Mitchell, I'm Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. We'll be back next Monday at 7, and contact Eric if you need him. See you around the campus.
Thanks for having me on, Pete. You take care.
You bet. You too, my friend.